this, what I read in the last few weeks. 1, 2, 3. Welcome back to the Jewish-Anglican. How you doing? How you doing? Hey, all. So, recently I read Jesus in the Jewish Roots of the Eucharist by Brant Pitry? I'm not sure how you pronounce his last name. Sorry if I'm butchering it. Anyways, so yeah, this is what I've read recently because I am very much love the Eucharist. The Eucharist is arguably one of the most fascinating things about Christianity. And I kind of want to talk about my experience with the Eucharist because I didn't really have a fine set of beliefs at first when I was becoming, when I was really getting more into Christianity per se. I never really thought of it as a symbol though. That never really made sense to me because I knew how important Christ emphasized the Eucharist. So I always thought the Eucharist isn't a symbol. There's such much emphasis on it. It has to be something. Now I'm not a subscriber to transubstantiation, or consubstantiation. I'm more of in the spiritual kind of side of the Eucharist. Like it's kind of there in a more of a spiritual form. Also, part of me also just thinks we probably don't know how the Eucharist is the Eucharist. But this book really helps me really just grasp the Eucharist in a much better way. First, as a Messianic Jew, I always appreciate it when they realize, oh right, Jesus and the apostles are Jews, so that's always fun. Gotta say, this was a really fun read, and what I took from it is that there's a lot of Eucharistic symbolism in the Old Testament. First of all, manna that the Israelites ate was very much considered as an extension of God's presence in heaven. It was called the bread of heaven, after all. So that's like the home run hit of this. You don't need many other arguments than that, in my opinion. I mean, there are a lot of arguments in here that very much are like, here's why the Eucharist connects back to the Old Testament. But I think just the bread, the manna, is probably the best argument here. Another one is just that the lamb, they would actually, you're technically supposed to eat the lamb in the Old Testament. When they shed the blood and put it over the doorway, yeah, the doorway, you were also supposed to eat the lamb. Now, this does kind of beg into a question of if you didn't eat the lamb, were you still saved from the angel of death, stuff like that. Brant Petir argues that you were not saved by the angel of death. I'm not sure, honestly. I think that's one I would have to pray and really think about. But overall, very great book. Small little nitpicks that he compares modern day Judaism to Protestantism, which, I mean, I kind of get it, but at least Protestants don't do the Eucharist in home. Anyways, I would totally recommend this book. It's really good book. This is kind of weird, but this is kind of an interesting side note. But I want to mention it. A while ago, I forgot how many months ago, but I was hearing a very interesting debate about should Christians be allowed to celebrate Passover. Now, this is an interest, and trust me, this does kind of go back to here. There's arguments: should Christians celebrate Passover? Yes or no? And the arguments are, well, yeah, I mean, Jesus was a Jew and all this, so why shouldn't Christians celebrate Passover? My take is, Christians should absolutely study Passover and should probably at least observe Passover to see how it is like in very orthodoxical communities. Orthodoxical, is that even a word? Anyways, but ultimately, Christians should not have to celebrate the Passover because they already have a Passover every Sunday at church. Because the Eucharist is the new Passover. I feel like people kind of mix that up. Anyways, would totally recommend this book. It's well written. It is well executed. I will say, at least for me, there was a lot of pulling of tons of different verses, especially towards the latter half of this. And, for my brain, it's kind of hard to keep them all track. I overall, still a really good book. Would recommend this if you want to know more about the Eucharist. And I will say, it doesn't really try to prove the Catholic view of the Eucharist. because he does keep pulling like Protestant, specifically Lutheran and Anglican like theologians. So it's not necessarily a Catholic arguing for the Catholic Eucharist, just a Christian arguing for the Christian Eucharist, which I appreciate, and would 100% recommend this book. It is really good.
And hello, editing Jewish-Anglican here. I did include something in the recording, but I had to cut it out because I was kept stumbling over my words. So I'm just going to say this real quick. What I find interesting is that wine was not in the original Passover. Wine was a later development. So this does mean some things, that Christ was fine with some developments of the liturgy. And you might be saying, well, but he called out the Sadducees and the Pharisees. And it's like, well, yeah, but he only called them out because they were going away from the meaning of the Bible. It's not because they added, something to the liturgy. This kind of, I really appreciate Brent Peter pointing that out, because in my opinion, that's really important to note, that you can have some reform within the church or adding to the church as long as it does not take away from the meaning of the Bible. Just wanted to say that the original recording was very bad. Anyways.
Kind of interesting. Anyways, would recommend you should. After I read the Jesus and the Jewish Roots of the Eucharist, I read Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde by Robert Louis Stevenson. I read this because I'm actually trying to adapt it into a stage play, because why not? And plus, I get mad at every adaptation of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. So, yeah. I gotta say, if you have not read Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, you absolutely should. It is one of the best novels from the late 1800s, in my opinion. Now, I haven't read that many. I've only read Dracula, Frankenstein, and this. But this is one of the best. If you have not read it, click off this video and go watch and read it now, because I will be getting to spoilers. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, so I'm sure you've heard about the twist about how like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde are actually a split personality and not two separate people, but that's not true, because in the book you follow the character of Utterson, a lawyer who discovers that for some reason Dr. Jekyll has changed his will to have all of his assets go to Mr. Hyde, Edward Hyde, but so Utterson naturally thinks this Hyde is blackmailing or threatening or doing something vile to Jekyll, since he is such an upstanding citizen in comparison. And Hyde has gone into some controversies of just stomping a child. Anyways, so as the book continues and more extremities from Mr. Hyde and more confusion around Dr. Jekyll emerge, Utterson is really interesting because he doesn't necessarily become obsessed, because he's kind of like this boring lawyer, but he goes on the verge of obsession of finding Hyde and Jekyll. It's a really interesting dynamic. And honestly, I think it's terrible that more adaptations don't choose Utterson, because Utterson should be adapted. I'm actually working on a stage play currently, and it's going well enough in the writing department. Haven't actually, made it into an actual stage play, but who knows? Maybe one day. Anyways, yeah. And in the end, what's really interesting is that Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde are the same person. Dr. Jekyll just simply uses a potion to change his face so he can do his evil things. He pretty much just goes incognito mode, which makes Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde far more relevant than it has ever been today. And we never know what Hyde does, but that makes it creepier. Is it sexual in nature? Is it violent in nature? It is such a fascinating book, and it really makes your skin crawl. It's like, what is going on with Hyde and Jekyll? Jekyll was never a good man. He was hiding his sinful desires like we all do, but instead of trying to talk with God or talk with a priest or talk with his family, he decides to create some way to indulge in them. And it is far more terrifying than anyone else can imagine. So I would recommend Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. It is more relevant to our society now than ever. It is a good book, we'll say. I was also have had a lot of fun adapting it. twist. But overall, yeah, this is really good. So that's why I read this week. Hope you enjoy, and God bless.